Something is creeping in. Don't follow it down.
Let me introduce you to Barry Clew, an authorised financial advisor from New Zealand and a very special kind of stain on humanity.
He was a very knowledgeable young guy.
He was a registered financial advisor.
Type of guy that was bending over backwards to help you.
Now, you could be forgiven for thinking that Barry sounds like a great guy, and you'd be right. Well, right up until the point when you're wrong.
It was all fictitious.
She stole from my son who has a disability.
Chris never knew. He died believing that we're all taken care of.
A psychopath is somebody who lacks empathy, acts impulsively. I think there's a strong case that Barry might be all of those things, actually.
To find out how Barry Clew stole over $15 million from 81 victims, subscribe to Clueless, the long con. That's Clueless, spelt Klooghless.
When we think about planes disappearing, the most common place we think is the Bermuda Triangle. The last place we believe an entire plane could vanish would be a river that is only 20 feet deep. But 68 years ago, that's precisely what happened. On January 30th, 1956, Major William Dotson and Captain John Jameson were assigned the task of flying a B-25 Mitchell bomber plane. Along with 4 other passengers from Nellis Air Force Base in Nevada to Olmsted Air Base near Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, to bring back parts for another aircraft. The mission seemed straightforward. They were to leave Nevada, make 2 stops to refuel, arrive in Pennsylvania to retrieve the parts, and drop off a few crew members before returning to Nellis Air Force Base. First, the plane landed in Oklahoma for the first refueling, where the crew stayed overnight. Then it voyaged on to another base in Michigan. Upon arrival, they were informed that the wait to refuel would be close to 3 hours due to an ice storm that had swept across Lake Michigan and caused a backup. The pilots were on a tight schedule and didn't want to wait around for hours to refuel. Weather conditions were too cold and icy for one of the crew to check the fuel dipstick on the wings manually. The pilots then decided that they had enough fuel to make the remaining 200 miles to their destination, based on the notoriously inaccurate fuel gauges on the B-25s. They pushed on to their destination, and the flight was routine until it reached the western part of Pennsylvania. That's when, for unknown reasons, the plane began losing a significant amount of fuel. Major Dotson then radioed the Pittsburgh airport to request an emergency landing. Fuel continued to pour from the vessel rapidly, and soon they were flying under 3,000 feet as they glided towards the city. Dotson immediately put out a mayday call in hopes of landing at the county airport that was closer by. The plane then curved over the Monongahela River that cuts through Pittsburgh, and suddenly both engines came to a complete standstill. Spectators on their way home could see the plane gliding closer to the Homestead Grace Bridge as they stopped their vehicles to get out and watch as it narrowly missed the bridge by only 50 feet. The plane was dead silent as it glided toward the icy water of the river below, before Major Dotson executed a nearly perfect emergency landing. The B-25 splashed down in the water in a wave of mist and ice, and then floated for 11 minutes as the crew evacuated onto the wings. Then, faced with no other option as the plane began to sink, the 6 crew members were forced to swim to shore in the freezing water filled with fast-moving driftwood. Pedestrians quickly tried to help by parking their trucks along the shoreline, trying to give the crew some extra light and sound they could follow to safety. 4 crew members managed to reach the shore. But Captain Gene Ingram and Staff Sergeant Walter Soucy wouldn't be so lucky. They succumbed to the icy water and drowned once their bodies went into shock. Their bodies were recovered several months later, miles downriver. The B-25 bomber drifted some and eventually sank 20 feet to the bottom of the river. Over the next 2 weeks, the Coast Guard and the Army Corps of Engineers attempted to recover the wreckage, but were unsuccessful. It seemed to have vanished beneath the murky brown water of the river completely. No clues or traces of the wreckage were ever spotted, even in the 1990s and again in the early 2000s, using state-of-the-art side-scan sonar to map the bottom of the river. The sonar was so powerful that the search team could easily spot everything that had ever sunk in the river. Old Ford pickup trucks, barges, and even as small as shopping carts were visible on the sonar. And despite their best efforts, nothing that resembled plane wreckage was ever spotted. The conspiracy that the government secretly fished it out soon after the crash then began to spread around. This is backed up by multiple handwritten notes by witnesses, all claiming that they saw pieces of the plane on the back of trucks at night. Even in the 1970s, a long-haul truck driver phoned into a radio show claiming that the CIA hired him to haul part of the plane to a missile site at Oakdale Air Force Station that was east of Pittsburgh, causing the minds of the public to concoct a plethora of other conspiracies. Some believe the flight was transporting several Las Vegas showgirls to Washington, D.C. to entertain their powerful politician boyfriends, and all of the women perished in the crash. Other conspiracies are that the plane could have been carrying chemical or biological weapons, and that the aircraft was removed to prevent contamination of Pittsburgh's water, or even that the plane was filled with mafia money or possibly a Russian defector or spy. The most popular conspiracy is that the B-25 was transporting alien bodies or wreckage from the UFO crash from a famous incident in Roswell, New Mexico 9 years prior. Theorists believe that alien bodies or wreckage were transported from Area 51 to the nearby Nellis base, where the plane initially departed. To this day, the wreckage of the B-25 Ghost Bomber plane remains unfound. Even with the latest in sonar technologies, it, along with a real reason for the flight in the first place, will stay a part of local folklore until the government declassifies its documents. Until then, we can only speculate and spiral down the rabbit hole of conspiracy theories that are now in the library down the hidden staircase. I'm Kristen Seavey. Join me next time for another unknown tale at the Hidden Staircase podcast.
Something is creeping in, don't follow it down.
Let me introduce you to Barry Clew, an authorised financial advisor from New Zealand and a very special kind of stain on humanity.
He was a very knowledgeable young guy.
He was a registered financial advisor.
Type of guy that was bending over backwards to help you.
Now, you could be forgiven for thinking that Barry sounds like a great guy, and you'd be right. Well, right up until the point when you're wrong.
It was all fictitious.
She stole from my son who has a disability.
Chris never knew. He died believing that we're all taken care of.
A psychopath is somebody who lacks empathy, acts impulsively. I think there's a strong case that Barry might be all of those things, actually.
To find out how Barry Clew stole over $15 million from 81 victims, subscribe to Clueless, the long con. That's Clueless, spelt Klooghless.